The land begs for rest. The drought has no mercy. Samuel looked at his calloused hands as the sun sank below the horizon. Sweat dripped warm down his wrinkled forehead. This could be his last night on the family farm. The bank would not wait any longer. The foreclosure notices accumulated on the kitchen table, stacked next to a mug of cold, black coffee. The inheritance of 3 generations was about to vanish into thin air. Total ruin. How could he save what was left? Many believe that a man's destiny is written solely by his hard work, but the true answer to the salvation of that land was buried under 5 feet of dry soil in a place he swore he would never open again. The old abandoned cabin at the very back of the property was not just a storage shed for junk left behind by his grandfather, it was a vault. The wind hissed through the cracks of the rotting wooden planks, bringing a heavy smell of dust and ancient secrets. Samuel walked toward it. His steps were heavy on the hard-packed earth. He carried an old iron flashlight that flickered with every movement. The thick rust on the padlock showed the brutal weight of time. No one had stepped inside that place for more than 40 years. Why break the promise now? The lean cattle lowed in the distance. The sound was mournful, almost a plea for help. The farm was dying, and Samuel knew it in his bones. He forced the iron latch with a heavy metal crowbar. The sharp snap echoed through the dark night like a rifle shot. The door yielded with a painful, agonizing groan of old timber resisting the invasion. Inside, the darkness was dense, almost palpable. Cobwebs floated in the stale, thin air. What did the old farmers really hide in that complete isolation? Samuel took a step forward, his boots crunching on the debris. The air inside felt different, colder than the summer night outside. It smelled of old grease, zinc, and decaying paper. For years, his father had forbidden him from approaching this perimeter. "Some things are meant to stay in the dark, Sam," he used to say, his voice grave, but his father was gone. And the bank executives were coming in less than 72 hours. Samuel's fingers tightened around the flashlight. His heart hammered against his ribs. He felt like a thief on his own land, a desperate man grasping at ghosts. Every corner of the small cabin was packed with history. Broken carriage wheels, rusted sickles, and sacks of fertilizer that had turned to stone decades ago. Yet, as the beam of his flashlight swept the floor, Samuel noticed a strange anomaly. The dust wasn't uniform. Near the back corner, the layer of grime was thin, almost as if someone, or something, had dragged a heavy weight across it recently. He stepped closer, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The silence of the night outside seemed to magnify the sound of his own breathing. He stopped. He listened. Was that just the wind? Or was there a rhythmic thumping coming from somewhere beneath his boots? He dropped to his knees, ignoring the sharp pain in his joints. He began to clear the ancient straw and debris with his bare hands. The rough wood scraped against his palms. But he didn't care. He was looking for a sign, a miracle, or perhaps just an explanation for why his family had guarded this useless plot of dying earth so fiercely. His fingers struck something cold and unyielding. It wasn't wood. It was iron. The hard-packed earth on the floor covered a massive secret. Samuel gave a short cough as the dust rose into his eyes. The barrel of the old shotgun he had brought along leaned against the wooden wall. He illuminated the corners of the square room once more. Nothing but empty crates and horse harnesses dried out by time. But something was fundamentally wrong. The center of the cabin floor looked too clean, free from the thick dust that covered the rest of the junk. Samuel approached with caution, his eyes narrowing through the weak beam of the flashlight. He kicked a layer of dry straw away. The noise was startlingly different. It wasn't the dull, thudding sound of compacted earth. It was a hollow sound, wood striking wood. He knelt down with great difficulty, feeling his worn-out joints protest the movement. His trembling hands began to push away the accumulated dirt and grime. A large hatch made of dark oak wood revealed itself. There was a cast iron ring embedded right in the center, worn smooth by ancient use, but perfectly firm. Samuel gripped the ring with both hands, planting his heavy boots firmly on the floor. He pulled with all the strength left in his tired, aching shoulders. The heavy oak hatch gave way with a wet, heavy thud, revealing a pitch-black opening that descended straight into the bowels of the property. A cold wind, carrying the sharp scent of iron and ozone, rushed up from the hole, causing his flashlight to flicker and almost die. Could this be an old root cellar? A rustic wooden ladder descended into the absolute darkness below. Samuel did not hesitate. The sheer desperation of losing his home was far greater than the primal fear of the unknown. He went down step by step, listening to the old structure creak violently under his weight. At the bottom of the narrow stone cubicle, the flashlight beam revealed something utterly unbelievable. A heavy solid wood table supported a massive metal chest reinforced with thick bands of aged bronze. The chest was tightly locked with a heavy padlock, but resting right on top of it was an immediate physical clue. An antique silver pocket watch, deeply engraved with a strange insignia that Samuel had never seen in his entire life. Next to it lay a highly detailed topographic map of the farm, drawn entirely by hand with faded black ink. The map contained several red markings, but one of them, located precisely at the northern boundary of the property, was circled 3 distinct times. A sudden, sharp noise on the ceiling of the cabin made Samuel freeze instantly. Quick, frantic steps. The terrifying sound of claws scratching against the dry wood right above his head echoed loudly through the silence of the underground chamber. Danger or salvation was beginning to prowl around the isolated property. Samuel instantly clicked off the flashlight and held his breath in the suffocating dark. Who else knew about this hidden room? The scratching lasted for what felt like an eternity. Samuel's lungs burned as he resisted the urge to gasp for air. The sound moved from the center of the cabin floor toward the back wall, then slowly faded into the ambient rustle of the dry night wind. He waited 5 full minutes before turning the flashlight back on. Its beam trembled against the silver pocket watch. He picked up the watch. It was surprisingly heavy, cold, and despite its age, he could hear a faint, rhythmic tick-tick-tick coming from inside its sealed casing. How could a watch locked away for 40 years still be running? He stuffed the watch and the hand-drawn map into his jeans pocket. The metal chest was too heavy to move without tools, and the padlock was a masterpiece of old-world security. He knew he couldn't force it open tonight. He climbed back up the creaking ladder, his eyes scanning the dark cabin as he emerged. Nothing had changed, but the air felt charged, heavy with impending consequence. He locked the cabin door with the broken latch as best as he could, his mind racing with possibilities. He walked back to the main house under a canopy of cold, indifferent stars. The map in his pocket felt like a burning coal against his thigh. His grandfather had been a quiet man, a veteran of wars no one talked about, a farmer who bought this arid piece of land when everyone else was fleeing to the cities. There had always been rumors in the valley about the silent old man of the north, but Samuel had always dismissed them as small-town gossip. Now, holding the ticking watch, he realized the gossip hadn't even scratched the surface of the truth. Who was his grandfather, really? The rest of the night passed without any further incidents, but the burning mystery completely consumed the mind of the old farmer. At the very first light of dawn, Samuel drove his old, battered pickup truck to the neighboring village. He desperately needed answers. The town's registry office was a decrepit, crumbling brick building that smelled heavily of moldy paper, stale coffee, and ancient bureaucracy. A young female clerk with thick glasses attended to him with clear disdain, but Samuel's fierce, quiet insistence finally forced her to go back into the archives to search for land deeds from the previous century. Clara pulled a massive, heavy ledger bound in black leather from the highest shelves. The pages inside were incredibly yellowed, almost translucent with age. Samuel watched in complete silence as she carefully flipped through the official records from the year 1940. There it was. The name of his grandfather, from whom Samuel had inherited the entire property, was surprisingly not the first name listed on the official deed. Before him, the vast land had belonged to a mysterious foreign mining consortium that had vanished without a trace from the region right after the outbreak of World War II. The official legal documents showed that the entire farm had been sold to his grandfather for a ridiculously low price, practically a donation. Why would a powerful international corporation give up such a massive tract of land for mere pennies? It says here that their operations were abruptly shut down due to national security reasons, Clara explained, adjusting her glasses with her finger. But there are absolutely no further details in the public record. The entire case file was archived directly by the federal government of that era. Samuel thanked her warmly and took the photocopies of the ancient maps she provided. Upon returning to his farm, he immediately noticed something bizarre. His old guard dog, a loyal but decrepit German shepherd named Old Truco, was standing completely still at the northern boundary of the property, exactly where the ancient map had the red circle. The dog wasn't barking. He didn't even look up when the truck approached. He just dug into the dry, sun-baked earth in an obsessive, frantic manner, his front paws already bleeding from the brutal effort against the rock-hard ground. Samuel tried to call him over, but the animal completely ignored the command, something he had never done in his 10 years of life. He growled fiercely at the dirt itself, as if there were something alive, hostile, and deeply threatening buried just beneath the surface. Samuel approached with a heavy shovel in hand. The dog's bizarre behavior detailed the deep mystery. What was hidden there was not gold, nor was it water. The very soil beneath his boots began to vibrate gently, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor that caused a flock of birds to take flight in panic from the nearby trees. The deepest secret of that land was finally about to emerge. Samuel dropped to his knees next to the dog, pulling the animal back gently. "Easy, boy. Easy," he muttered, but his own voice was shaking. The dog's whimpering was low, a sound of pure terror mixed with a strange, instinctual drive to uncover what lay beneath. Samuel took the shovel and drove it into the earth. The ground was incredibly hard, baked by months of relentless drought, but as he cleared away the top layer of dirt, the shovel struck something that emitted a metallic ring. Clang. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't an old pipe. Samuel cleared the dirt faster, his heart hammering in his chest. The metal plate underneath was painted a dull military green, long since scratched and rusted, but still incredibly solid. He realized then that the entire northern field, a field where crops had consistently failed to grow for 40 years, was sitting on top of something artificial. His grandfather hadn't just farmed this land, he had guarded it. The realization sent a cold shiver down his spine. The bank wasn't just coming to take a failing farm, they were about to accidentally inherit a secret that had been buried by the government itself. Samuel knew he had to open it before they arrived. Samuel began to dig alongside the dog with frantic energy. Sweat mixed with the bright red clay dust on his face, creating a mask of pure determination. The heavy shovel struck something solid again after 70 centimeters of depth. It wasn't a natural rock formation. It was a massive steel plate riveted tightly, part of a much larger structure that seemed to extend underneath the entirety of the dry, dead cornfield. With an almost Herculean effort, he cleared the remaining surface and found a heavy industrial iron hatch, identical to the ones used in mid-century military installations. The climax had finally arrived. Samuel used his heavy crowbar to force the ancient locking mechanism of the hatch. The pressurized air that hissed out of the opening smelled intensely of machine oil, old grease, and powerful static electricity. He slowly descended through the dark opening, discovering a vast underground complex that linked the back cabin directly to this remote part of the farm. The walls down here were made of thick, reinforced concrete, covered by ancient diesel generators that still maintained faint, pulsing red emergency lights. In the very center of the main control room sat an enormous metal control panel and dozens of heavy wooden crates stamped with the official seal of the National Army. Samuel carefully pried open one of the crates, fully expecting to find illegal weapons, stolen gold, or wartime contraband. Instead, he found highly detailed scientific reports, geological surveys, and hundreds of soil and liquid samples sealed tightly in thick glass vials. What he had spent his entire life believing was a ruined piece of land or a familial curse revealed itself to be a massive, brilliant plan architected decades ago by his own grandfather and a secret government task force. The farm had never been meant for successful agriculture. It was the perfect visual cover for one of the largest strategic reserves of subterranean thermal water and ultra-rare minerals on the entire continent. His grandfather had willingly accepted the heavy, painful burden of appearing to be a failed, impoverished farmer for his entire life, just to protect the pure water table from the insatiable greed of foreign corporations that would completely destroy the ecology of the valley if they discovered the truth before the legal protection timeline expired. And that legal protection timeline expired exactly the next morning. Samuel read the final letters written by his grandfather, which were kept safe inside an open wall safe. The old man knew that when the farm's accumulated debt finally reached its breaking point, his grandson would inevitably look for answers in the underground structures. The imminent bankruptcy was, in reality, the final countdown timer for the activation of the highly lucrative, sustainable ecological exploration rights, fully guaranteed by a secret government trust fund that would instantly deposit millions into the legitimate heir's account the moment the property boundaries were officially validated. The grand revelation happened right there, in the heavy silence of the concrete bunker. He wasn't ruined. He wasn't a failure. He was the chosen guardian of an ecological treasure that would save the entire valley from eternal drought. Samuel sat on an empty crate, the letters trembling in his rough hands. Tears welled up in his blue eyes, cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. All those years of resentment, all those nights wondering why his father and grandfather had refused to sell this useless, stubborn dirt. It all made sense now. They hadn't been stubborn, they had been heroic. They had sacrificed their own reputation, their own comfort, and their own wealth to ensure that this water, the lifeblood of the entire region, wouldn't be poisoned by corporate greed. The burden they carried was immense, and now it was his turn to finish the job. He looked at the control panel. A small green light began to blink steadily next to a digital clock that was counting down the hours until dawn. The exact moment the clock struck 6 a.m., the trust fund would activate, and the legal notices in his pocket would become nothing more than waste paper. But he had to survive the night. He remembered the scratches on the cabin roof, the strange steps in the dark. The corporate spies who had been circling the property for weeks under the guise of bank assessors weren't looking for mortgage payments. They were looking for this hatch. They knew the timeline was expiring, and they wanted to claim the land before the trust could activate. Samuel stood up, his posture straightening. The old farmer was gone. The guardian had awakened. He climbed back up to the surface, the dog waiting for him with ears perked. The night was still, but Samuel could see the faint headlights of an unmarked vehicle parking down by the main highway. They were coming. He walked back to the house, not with the heavy step of a defeated man, but with the measured stride of a soldier. He loaded his grandfather's old shotgun, cleaned his glasses, and sat on the porch, waiting for the dawn. He wasn't going to let them take his grandfather's legacy. Not tonight. Not ever. The resolution of Samuel's life after the incredible discovery was remarkably fast, yet profoundly deep. The high-level attorneys representing the secret government trust fund arrived at the property the very next morning, fully validating the ancient documents and completely paying off every single cent of debt with the bank before the noon sun could even reach its peak. The heavy machinery that began arriving at the farm a few weeks later were not bulldozers of environmental destruction, but highly advanced ecological channeling equipment. Pure, crystal-clear water soon erupted from the deep underground reservoirs, abundant and life-giving, rapidly transforming the dead, dry cornfield into a breathtaking verdant oasis that would completely supply 3 neighboring cities for generations to come. Samuel still wore his faded mustard-colored cotton t-shirt, but the crushing weight on his shoulders had vanished forever. He had successfully saved the history of his family. He stood on the newly built wooden deck overlooking the vibrant green valley, looking down at his same calloused, scarred hands, but this time with a tired, deeply victorious smile. The emotional ending clearly showed that every single ounce of past suffering had a much greater, noble purpose. He wasn't just a simple surviving farmer anymore. He was the proud guardian of a monumental legacy. The true wealth of a human being is never found in what they loudly display to the world, but rather in the sacred values they protect in absolute silence when nobody else is watching. Sometimes, the absolute greatest answers to our current, most painful life crises are buried deep within the very roots that we foolishly insist on forgetting. Take a long, honest look at your own history. What are you currently ignoring in your own backyard that could completely change your life today?